so vogue. Friends, it's time to... Hold on, this isn't right. That's better. We need to make everything blue, because we're talking about men today. And naturally, blue is a boy's color. And definitely nobody else other than boys can have any association with the color blue. Despite the fact that originally it was always pink for boys and blue for girls. But that's another story. Now then, where were we? The time has come, my merry friends, to talk of many things. Of blush, of contour, of sealing spray, of eyeliner with wings. Yes, friends, today we're going to be talking about makeup, and very specifically, men with makeup. You may have noticed, but I like to wear it. Now, for those people that are wondering, yes, I will be doing a review on the Beetlejuice movie. I haven't seen it yet. I'm waiting for a friend of mine to get back off holiday before we go see it, because I'm going to go dress up to the nines, do all the cosplay thing, and then we're going to go see it together. So don't worry, that is coming, but it's just... I needed a bit of a break between all of the movie reviews I've been doing, so I thought I would leave it a week. Next week, you'll have your review, okay? Now then, in regards to men with makeup, you may have noticed that on all social media, when I post something, I tend to use the hashtag man in makeup. Naturally, that is because I am a man who wears... Do I really have to point it out? And in this day and age, this is becoming a much more common thing. Men are able to express themselves through the medium of makeup, and it in no way makes them more effeminate. And as a result, I thought I wanted to talk about that. As somebody who's been wearing makeup for the vast majority of my life now, I thought we should have a discussion about, a bit of the history of makeup, where it came from, and more specifically, how that had relation to the masculine of the genders. And then, of course, my relation to makeup and, my history with making myself look undeniably beautiful, as I'm sure you'll all agree. Now, when I was growing up, I had a wonderful pair of parents who are still together today. They're nauseatingly in love. They hold hands down the street and kiss each other in public and other such grotesque and nauseating things. Oh, how dare they, right? However, they were super supportive and super encouraging in all of the things that I wanted to do. Self-expression, as it were. They were new romantics. Some of you don't know what new romantics are, do you? Okay, look, Boy George, Adamant was technically post-punk, but kind of often fit into the new romantic genre, and... Never gonna give you up. Look, I had to, okay? Look, that was just the way that it worked. How could I talk about the new romantics and not... Well, anyway. And as well as being new romantic, they were very encouraging in self-expression. They were very much the kind of parents who said, look, you want to do something? Give it a try. Whatever you want to do, we will accept you. We will accept you however you are, whoever you are, and whatever that entails, we're there for you. Which was absolutely fantastic. However, that didn't mean that I wasn't accountable for my... very questionable livelihood. They definitely held me accountable. I wasn't spoiled, but they were encouraging in allowing me to be expressive with my clothing, with my makeup, with the way that I wanted to be, That didn't mean that I jumped straight into wearing a full face of makeup by any stretch of the imagination. There was a process, as there always is. But before we delve into my own personal journey with putting on a delightful face, let's talk about a brief history of men and makeup, shall we? Okay, it all started back in the old days. We're talking 6,000 BC. In fact, 6,000 to 4,000 BC, technically speaking, with the ancient Egyptians. Yeah, the ancient Egyptians were the beginning of our story. They were the earliest documented civilization that we to my knowledge, are aware of that actively wore makeup as part of their day-to-day lives. Now, it has to be said, makeup in ye olde days was not gender restrictive by any stretch of the imagination. All people of all genders, of all classes, wore makeup. The ancient Egyptians believed that wearing makeup was akin to godliness, and by wearing makeup, it would appeal more to their deities. Makeup was also a depiction of wealth, much like the clothing element of it, if you are aware of the little deep dive we did into the history of nudity, you'll probably be aware that it was only the higher echelons of society in ancient Egypt that wore clothing. Check this out if you would like to know more. It was only the higher echelons that would wear clothing, and everybody would wear makeup. If we're talking about the differences in wealth and makeup, everyone seemed to wear the same sort of makeup. However, how it was stored was really the show of wealth. If it was stored in clay jars, then it would show that you were poorer. If it was stored in ornate boxes, then you were richer, etc. The primary makeup that everybody seemed to wear back in those days was kohl. How do you pronounce that?
Kohl.
Kohl. Kohl, which is K-O-H-L, which was a black eyeshadow made from the ore of galena. Like, it was galena ore that was refined down, and actually kohl is still used in today's makeup. You can still get kohl eyeliner and kohl eyeshadow, though in ancient Egyptian times it was often mixed with like a blue eyeshadow or a green eyeshadow, and the vast majority of people that would wear the nice eye makeup would also redden their lips. Now, this isn't just an aesthetic thing, there was also a belief system behind it. Egyptians saw makeup as a source of personal power. They believed that by putting on eye makeup, it would protect them from the evil eye and would also protect them against diseases and damage taken from the sun. UV damage, fire damage, heat damage, that kind of thing. Depends on what tabletop roleplay you're playing. But anyway, they also decorated their entire bodies with henna as well. It wasn't just their faces, it was their entire bodies, which, as we discussed in the whole history of nudity thing, makes sense because the vast majority of people didn't wear any clothing. So if you wanted to look nice, you would have to make your bare skin look nice, you know? Then we skip forward a bit to 3000 BCE, to the Chinese empires, going to the Far East there, where throughout ancient China, the use of nail varnish, originally, the use of nail varnish was a way of showing status. The high-ranking officials, the high-ranking leaders, would wear gold and silver nail varnish. Men as well. The low-ranking officials would wear red and black nail varnish, and it was forbidden for the common folk, the average citizen of China, to wear any nail varnish at all because, as described, it was a sign of status. So men and makeup, including nail varnish, was used from a very, very, very early point in history. 4,000 years, 4 to 6,000 years before Christ's existence, we were wearing makeup. Then later in Chinese history, there was the adoption of the paling of the skin using a variety of different makeups to make a person look paler. But that was, from what I've read, far more along the lines of women and makeup. And today we're talking about men and makeup. Now, the earliest actual depiction of any kind of literary evidence that we have of people condemning makeup was actually in the Old Testament, or the Jewish Torah. In the book of Jeremiah in 627 BCE, we see some condemnation of makeup, a accusation that to be vain is to be sinful. To glorify one's features is to be further from the divine, as it were. But enough of us condemning makeup. We're talking about celebrating makeup, and we're continuing on to the Roman Empire. Yes, there is that wonderful meme that's going around saying, hey, how many times does a man think about the Roman Empire? Well, it turns out men in the Roman Empire wore makeup too. Oh, isn't that lush? Yes, the Romans tended to very much enjoy the more natural look of things. However, they would still pale their faces and commit certain rouges, a little hint of the cheeks and a little reddening of the lips, in order to show that they were healthier as people. It may not have been extravagant, but it was still makeup. So next time that you see some masculine man talk about the Holy Roman Empire and how amazing it was, just remind him that they also wore makeup. To be honest with you, I might do that just to see their reaction. Not only did they enjoy a little bit of face touching up, but they also painted their nails. In fact, it is documented that they were known to paint their nails using an elixir of pig fat and blood. Not the kind of formula I personally would have chosen, but the fact of the matter is they still did it. That takes us from like 625 through to 100 AD. The period between like 100 AD through till like the Renaissance is a bit of a blur from what I have seen. I can't really find too much around the whole Dark Ages period. To no surprise, the Dark Ages are called the Dark Ages because it's hard to find any real evidence about it. However, we do have knowledge of like the Goths, and no, I don't mean Typo Negative and Sisters of Mercy. I'm talking about like the German collection of people, the Goths, and the Picts and the Celts, etc. Like, they all wore a variety of different traditional body paints that they would wear to war, paints they would wear for rituals and stuff. However, I don't know, or I certainly couldn't find within my limited research of what they did for decoration. And if you know something about that period of time to do with makeup, and specifically men in makeup, I would love to hear about it. So please put it down below. I will very much appreciate that. The next real inference we get of men and makeup, and men having a relationship to makeup, is right the way through to the Renaissance and the Baroque period. So the Renaissance was like 1300 AD. The Baroque period was 1600 to 1750, if I remember correctly. During this time, it was the European aristocracy that really favored makeup, as it really showed their status in society. A variety of things was very popular then. The makeup, the wigs, the fashion items, the high heels. Yes, friends, the high heel was originally invented for men. In fact, it was invented for men in the 10th century in Persia, but that's an entirely different topic. But they were very, very common in the courts of Europe during like the Renaissance and the Baroque period of time, you know? Not only that, but this appearance was seen as the height of masculinity. Yes, wigs, makeup, the colouring of the lip, the rouge of the cheek, a little beauty spot, and most importantly, fake eyebrows were seen as the height of refinement, and of course, the height of fashion. However, towards the end of this period of time, makeup was associated with frivolity, very much associated with the fickleness that was well known in the manner of the aristocracy. And thus, unfortunately, being the fact that it was still very, very misogynistic in that day and age, the idea of makeup became more associated with women. Because, of course, it was extremely womanlike to be frivolous and fickle, and definitely not like men at all. And this saw a decline in the use of makeup, very specifically with men, but also on a general sort of societal level, especially towards like the mid-1800s with the Victorian era. Queen Victoria herself deemed the use of makeup to be vulgar. And that was a direct quotation. That's what she said. She thought it was vulgar. And this whole perception was backed up by the Church of England, who really used that perspective to push their own agenda of seeing makeup, vanity, and very specifically femininity to be sinful, to be the work of the devil. And subsequently, religious values of the time really narrowed what it meant to be defined as man, to be defined as male or masculine, which inevitably in recent times, and by recent times I mean the past couple of hundred years, proceeded to have this idea of makeup being for girls only. The return of makeup for we men was actually brought around back in the 1930s. It was the invention of film that brought around makeup for we men. It was the film industry, and very specifically Hollywood, that saw men wearing makeup again for the purpose of aesthetics. They would wear it on the screen, and then they would wear it out and about to maintain that more aesthetic glow that you can pretty much only get when you do wear makeup. And that brings us very swiftly back up to modern day times. And by modern day times, I mean like the 70s onwards. In the 70s and 80s, we really saw a rise in glam rock, where there were a variety of different movements, both of like the hippie movement and the glam rock movement, where people were breaking social boundaries in order to have more artistic expression, both in themselves and the things that they do, both art and music and performance. There was far more breaking of social boundaries, people being sick of being contained, being refined, being boxed into a specific thing. You have to be this way because society tells you so. Naturally, they did this in a whole load of different ways, with drug usage and lifestyle choices and anarchy, with like the punk movement of the 70s and 80s. But very specifically, they also used self-expression. Artists like David Bowie, artists like Mark Bolan, Prince in the 80s, and then, of course, the whole glam rock movement and the new romantic movement all really broke the boundaries of what it was to be considered masculine, what it was to be considered man. With all the stuff that was going on politically and societally in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot to rebel against, and I think that the world just got sick of being boxed in. You had to be a certain way to be a man. You had to be a certain way to be a woman. And we got sick of that, you know? That really hit a height in the late 80s, early 90s with the hair metal, glam metal scene, where everything was a little more over the top. Everything was super accentuated, really, really in your face. It was manufactured, which really took away from the idea of the rebellious nature of like the early rock movements of the 70s and the early 80s. And then that all came crashing down with the grunge movement, which rebelled against the hair metal movement. I'm not going to go into the history of music here because there are a million people that will be able to tell it a lot better than I can. But grunge basically killed hair metal. And grunge was all about being yourself. No makeup, no over-the-top stuff. It was all about being yourself, in yourself, and representing the situation you are in, no matter how bad that situation happened to be. It was that realism that made it so appealing to people, where you would see this over-the-top, manufactured, pushed to the nines, like music videos from hair metal, and then you would see something so controversial like Nirvana when they first hit the screen, you know? Now, that isn't to say that makeup died off during the grunge time, because naturally there were other music forms going along it. Alongside and parallel to it was like the goth movement that never really changed the makeup looks that they went for, and then the goth movement then parallels like the new metal movement of the late 90s, early 2000s, and that evolved in itself to the emo stuff. That all happened, you know? But men wearing makeup really came back with a vengeance in the turn of the millennium, the year 2000, when social media was really taking off in its own form, because with that came social media influencers, content creators. Yes, the joys of content. Because people were allowed to be themselves, and they were allowed to find other people that represented themselves, so they didn't feel quite so alone. And these weren't celebrities, these weren't untouchable people, these weren't completely outrageous standards that people could never live up to. These were real people. YouTubers, Instagrammers, Facebookers. In fact, back in the day, it was like MySpace and stuff like that. They were real people that you could identify with because of how real they were. But alongside being real, they were also self-expressive. They were also able to express themselves in whichever way they wanted, and that was okay. Not only that, but of course then came the makeup influencers, and that grew an entire generation of people, regardless of their gender. You could be inspired by what it was they were wearing. And that brings us full circle to me. Let's draw the attention back to me. I like your attention. That's the way that this goes, you know? So returning to the point where I mentioned the fact that my parents were new romantics, you remember that time that we had all those minutes ago? Naturally, they allowed me to play with makeup as a kid. And when I was getting into the idea of getting into makeup and playing with makeup and exploring that realm of things, it was the same time that my sister was old enough to really start getting interested in makeup. I'm the eldest of four. There's me, two sisters, and a little brother, and that was kind of like a great alignment time, and therefore my mother had some spare makeup that she had as the kids' makeup. For those of you that are not aware, makeup tends to be really expensive, so you give the cheap, nasty stuff that you don't mind getting ruined to the kids to play with and explore themselves, you know? You don't want your kids getting their grubby mitts on all of your fancy makeup, because that shit is expensive. I played around with dressing in interesting ways and using different makeup styles during my primary school years, but I very quickly grew out of it because it wasn't really cool in the 90s for a lad's face to be covered in makeup, regardless of how glorious I'm sure that I looked as a young child. And then it was only really in my early teens that I really started to think about makeup again. Like, I had grown up watching a lot of the hair metal and the glam metal, and I loved that over-the-top stuff. I loved how over-the-top and outrageous and in-your-face it was. That stuff really, really appealed to me. But regardless of how much that appealed to me, it still wasn't cool. And therefore, I never really explored it. However, when I was in my teens and like looking into new metal and getting into goth and what have you, and sat there on a on a Sunday morning watching Kerrang and Scuzz and MTV2 and stuff like that, that's where I really started thinking about exploring makeup like those gothic artists that I loved so much. Now, I have to say, by the time that I got to that point in my life, by the time I arrived at that point, I was getting pretty frustrated. I mean, we all get teenage frustrations, teenage angst. There's a whole load of hormones going around in your system. But I really, really struggled with my lack of self-expression. I spent so long trying to fit the mold of the society that I was in, of what was cool, that I never really thought about stepping out of it. And this gave me an invitation to step out of it. Like, I condensed my self-expression because I really wanted to be cool, but everything that I thought was cool just wasn't. Oh, to look back on those years and cackle about how naive I was. It was only after really starting to delve back into like the gothic stuff, like stepping away from the new metal thing and moving into the goth realms, that I really started to play with makeup again and start to get familiar with how makeup worked, get comfortable with it. And it felt comfortable. That level of self-expression felt good. It felt comfortable. Then, of course, I saw The Crow and have naturally recently done the review of that, the new one anyway, but I saw the original Crow, and that eye design and that expression and that unique identifiability, I naturally wanted my own. I looked for my own identifiable look that I could use every single time, and I would go out and I'd party and have a good time, and I would always wear that appearance. And if I can find out what it looks like, it's here. This is me from younger years. Baby vein. Yeah, I've been like going out to nightclubs from about the age of 14. That's another story in and of itself, but effectively, I was a bit of a party animal. I did a lot of things earlier than I should have done, but it's fine, it's fine. I turned out all right, right? And that is what I used to look like. And then as that time went on and that element of me grew and I started getting inspired by so many other things outside of the realms of goth, that I then started to find my little box that I'd comfortably put myself in to be too restrictive. But by this point, I had explored so much that that box didn't really matter anymore, and I started dabbling a bit more into using color and different elements to help me with my self-expression, to step outside of the box and just do what I wanted to make myself feel good. Naturally, all of you can definitely still see the gothic influence, and I'm still very, very inspired by a gothic aesthetic. However, I definitely don't see that to be a limiting factor in my self-expression these days, you know? Nowadays, I wear what I want, when I want, and I couldn't give less of a fuck about anybody else's opinions, because that's just the way I am, you know? If other people have an issue with it, that's a them problem. Makeup is an art form. It's a mode of self-expression, and if other people don't like it, that's a them issue. That's a them problem. So yeah, there's a cheeky little trip down memory lane for me, and also a little brief history, very, very brief history of men and their relationship to makeup throughout history. I very much appreciate you watching, you delightful individuals. If you have enjoyed our delightful trip down the masculine makeup motorway, then please think about clicking that cheeky little thumbs up. I'd remind you because I always forget to do it, so if I remind you, then it'll remind you to do it as well. And of course, if you would like to, if you'd like to see more of this content and the other kind of stuff that I do, consider clicking that cheeky little subscribe button, you know? Of course, if you would like to check me out on other platforms, you can find me on twitch.tv/ValentVein, where we talk about all kinds of peculiar and interesting things, and you get to see me do all kinds of odd and peculiar things. In fact, in the near future, we're having some kind of party, so come check us out on there. Of course, you can check me out on TikTok. I am back on TikTok. I am posting a lot more regularly these days. A lot of whimsical facts about schmecks and that sort of thing. And of course, you can check me out on Instagram, where you get to see my delightful features in a variety of different forms. A lot of behind the stage stuff. There's a lot of like shows and stuff coming up in the later half of the year. So yeah, that's where you'll get to see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, because that tends to be what I do there, you know? Now, as I am branching into further different realms of hedonistic content, because that's what I am, a delightful hedonist, I would love to know, is there any like particular aesthetic looks that you would like to see me try and do a little bit of an explore, deep dive in the history of it? Or, of course, any subjects that you would like me to look into a bit further? Then please let me know. Stick it in the comments, do the thing. But yeah, let me know. I'm intrigued. I'm very much growing at the moment in my expanse of where I want to go with content, and I'm really enjoying where we're going. So any inspiration is always welcome. I like doing new things, you know? As you can tell by my aesthetic choices throughout the years. Do love a cheeky little deep dive. Not like that. Well, not like that. And of course, friends, I will be back next week, where we'll be doing a review of Beetlejuice. As per usual with our reviews, we will do a spoiler-free section and then a spoiler section, so that you can get a good grip of what is about, if you aren't sick to death of Beetlejuice reviews by now. Do you know what I mean? Until next time, you delightful individuals, don't do anything I wouldn't do, because if I wouldn't do it, it'll fucking kill you.